In this video, I'm going to regale you with my musings about whether or not we'll ever get a new Mordheim tabletop game from Games Workshop. Just up front, I want to let everybody know I don't have any insider information, nothing about that. Haven't talked to anybody at Games Workshop about any plans. This is literally the culmination of on and off again for about the last month. A lot of shower thoughts. You know, you're in there showering like this, as one does, and you think about stuff that's not showering, because showering's kind of boring and you do it like every day or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, this is culmination of the ideas that I've been having about it and thinking about it and all that kind of stuff, and maybe you'll find it interesting or not. So for those of you that don't know, Mordheim was a game that came out in the 90s from Games Workshop, and it was back when Warhammer Fantasy was around and not Age of Sigmar. So it was a game, a small scale kind of skirmish game, 28mm scale, but it was designed to be bands of treasure hunters fighting over the ruins of a city called Mordheim, or City of the Damned to some degree, which honestly, if you're going to name a city City of the Damned, you kind of have to expect, anyway. But at one point, a comet appeared in the sky, a twin-tailed comet, which is the kind of avatar or the symbol of Sigmar, and people were like, oh, hey, that's a great, portent, and other people were like, oh no, it's a terrible omen and whatnot. And then as it turned out, it just hit the city and destroyed it, which I guess was the third option. So in doing that, it created all this stuff called warpstone, which was highly valuable for reasons. And so you would go into the cities and fight against other warbands of treasure hunters to try to get the most warpstone. And it had a lot of campaign type things to it, because you could build up over time. If you've played Frostgrave from Osprey Games, Frostgrave is a lot like Mordheim. And since Mordheim's not in print anymore, I kind of feel that's where Frostgrave was designed to sort of fill that niche. It also fixed a bunch of things that were sort of broken about the original Mordheim, at least in my opinion. And so, if you're interested in playing Mordheim or something like Mordheim, but GW hasn't made a new Mordheim, maybe they will, maybe they won't. Let's see after I get done talking all this stuff. Check out Frostgrave, which I think is about to have a second edition coming out at the end of this month, if I got all my cards right. So the question is, will Games Workshop make a new version of Mordheim? Mordheim came out roughly around the same time as Necromunda, and they made a new version of Necromunda, so, there you go. Well, there's more to it than that, in my opinion. So let's just try to lay these things out so we can kind of see the parallels and then maybe make some decisions based off of that. Okay, so you've got yourself your 40K in the sci-fi realm, and you've got yourself the Age of Sigmar in the fantasy realm at this point. Those are both army scale games, which means that they have lots and lots and lots and lots of models. Okay, so then they came out with Kill Team. Now, Kill Team has been around for a long time, but in the past, Kill Team was always designed so that you had to still have the normal 40K big rule book, you still had to have a codex, and then you just had these extra add-on rules that allowed you to play 40K in a slightly smaller, kind of different way. So there's that. When Kill Team came out in 2018, the new version, it was a totally different thing. It was a single book that had all the rules and the army lists, and it was a whole thing. But it's like 40K as far as like the stats are kind of the same, but not quite. And the big thing about it is that you use normal 40K miniatures. Okay. Then before that, Necromunda came out. And before Necromunda came out, Shadow War Armageddon came out. So Shadow War Armageddon came out, and people who knew Necromunda was like, that's basically Necromunda. They just don't want to make new models for it, so it still used the normal 40K models, much like Kill Team did later on. Yeah. Anyway, so then not that long after Shadow War Armageddon came out, then Necromunda came out, to which a lot of us went, wait, didn't you? So that was weird, and then Shadow War Armageddon disappeared, like Bigfoot. So now you got yourself your Necromunda, which came out very different than the original Necromunda. Gangs, lots and lots of models that they had to create, which are very expensive to create, both in development time and the steel molds and all that stuff. But they came out with, to start, basically, just 2, but then they expanded quite quickly to 6 different warbands. You got your Goliaths, your Eschers, your Van Sars, your Delac, or Delaque, depending who you talk to, Orlac and Caudor. Anyway, so you've got all these different models, and it's not designed to be played with 40K models. Although, side note, now you can play with Chaos Cultists and Genestealer Cults, I believe. There's a new book that came out. Anyway, So that was like 2017. Then 2018, they went, hey, look, Kill Team. Okay, so now you got your 40K, you got your Age of Sigmar, and now here in your Skirmish side, you've got Kill Team, and you've also got Necromunda, and they are different, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a sec. So when Warcry was announced, there was a lot of gnashing of teeth from certain people because they're like, well, this is going to take place of Mordheim, and that's a real bummer because I want Mordheim, I don't want Warcry, I don't know what Warcry is. Well, as it turns out, Warcry does not take the place of Mordheim. Warcry is basically kind of the fantasy version of Kill Team. Now, it's different, however. All of these different games all have differences. None of them are just reskins of the other side, okay? Age of Sigmar is not just fantasy 40K. Back in the day, it kind of was, except that back in Warhammer Fantasy, you had square bases and you moved in rank and flank, and you had the circle bases with 40K and you moved in squads with coherency. Well, now that's the case for both Age of Sigmar and also 40K. You've got the circles and the coherency. But Age of Sigmar has free war scrolls that you can download, whereas you got codexes over with 40K. So that's a big difference. It makes the game wildly different that way. The numbers and the stats are also different and things like that. Some of them, like a 3-up is a 3-up, but still, that doesn't make them they both use 3-ups for the same game. They're not. They're different games. They have some similarities, but they have some differences, and that makes those two games pretty different, not just in setting, but in also play style and a lot of other things. And so then when Warcry came out, Warcry is kind of like Kill Team, except Kill Team, they never made any models for Kill Team because you're supposed to use 40K models. And with Warcry, they gave you the option of using both their normal models that came out with the game, and there have been, 6 different, I think, and soon to be 7 different warbands that have come out now, Iron Golems and Corvid Cabal and the other ones. But you can also use normal Age of Sigmar models. So that's different than Kill Team because Kill Team just uses 40K. This uses Age of Sigmar and also these specialized models. And then you got yourself Necromunda down here, which up until just recently basically just used Necromunda models. So, wasn't I talking about Mordheim? That's a very good point. And Mordheim would be down here because I say that Mordheim is the counterpart to some degree of Necromunda. But I think that if they do bring it back, that's where it'll go, obviously. But I think that they've got 3 different possibilities on ways they could do it. Some of them people might not like. Now, one possibility is basically to just decide we're just going to redo Mordheim. It's still going to take place in the old world back before the end times. Those of you who are relatively new, the old Warhammer Fantasy stuff, that was known as the old world. And then eventually the end times happened where times got ended. And then 1,000 years happened, and that's when Age of Sigmar started. So it's been a while, right? So if they're going to stick to the old style kind of Mordheim, what they would need to do then, kind of like they did with Necromunda, what they would need to do would be to make all new sculpts for that game, kind of like they did with Warcry to some degree. But you wouldn't really be able to bring too many different Age of Sigmar models into Mordheim because the Age of Sigmar models are all very much, most of them are very much all about the new style. Your Daughters of Cain and your whatever, Deepkin and all that kind of stuff. Like none of those models would probably work very well in Mordheim generally if it was still in the old world. So they would have to then produce a box with at least 2 forces in it, and they would have to be all new sculpts. And then they've got kind of 2 options in that situation. They either do the same thing they did in Kill Team, which is they also, no, that's not true actually. They'd have to do the same thing they did in Warcry. In Kill Team, you got 2 old sprues, basically you got Gene Stealer cults and you got your AdMech, but you got really cool terrain. And then that box only lasted for a while and disappeared, and there was much gnashing of teeth. There's a new one that's not quite as nice, but it's got Space Wolves and Tau. Over here in Warcryville, they came out with a bunch of terrain and 2 brand new things in the box. But again, now that is also out of print from what I understand, and also, again, gnashing of teeth. And also kind of wasn't cheap. I think it was like $165, $180, something like that American, if I remember correctly. So there's that option. They could come out with totally new warbands and also terrain and put it in a pretty expensive box. And if they did that, if you've looked at the most recent Necron big box, Dark Uprising or whatever, that was nearly $300. So that would also cause a bunch of trouble. I think people would be unhappy about that. Another option, if they want to stick with the old world and keep it there, is to just release, kind of like they did in the original, well, not the original Necromunda, but the Necromunda from 2017, basically come out with, here's 2 warbands and a flat board, and have a good time with that. That was one of the reasons I wasn't super interested in Necromunda when it re-released in 2017, because of the fact that there was basically no terrain. And for me, Necromunda was always about verticality. Mordheim was quite a bit like that as well. So to release a game with just 2 new warbands, just so they could keep it in the old world, I don't know that's a good idea, especially if you can't then put in some terrain. It would make a cheaper box, but I think that it wouldn't necessarily be what they want to do. In my opinion, and this will ruffle some feathers, I think they need to go this direction. I think what they need to do is move Mordheim to Age of Sigmar. Get it out of the old world. It's no longer about, there was this city, which was called the City of the Damned. Again, bad marketing. And then it got hit by a comet. Who's surprised by that? Instead, say, this was this big city that was huge and amazing back in the old world, and then the end times, and it's been lost for 1,000 years, and it has now been rediscovered. In its ruins, no one lives there anymore, except for maybe monsters and stuff like that. But there's a lot of magical treasure, people looking for power, stuff like that. Warbands go in, boom, boom, boom. That way, you can then use normal Age of Sigmar models, much like you do in, say, something like Kill Team, but they could release the box with tons and tons of terrain. Use the models you like, but just sell the rule book, like a big honkin' rule book, maybe not as big as this one, but a big honkin' rule book, and then also sell a bunch of terrain in that box and make that the start of a new terrain line. The big benefit there would it would also then be terrain that would be perfectly useful within Age of Sigmar as well. Now, there are folks that will be unhappy about the move to Age of Sigmar with Mordheim, and I understand that. But the other 2 options are going to be pretty expensive, and potentially, depending on how sales go, you might not see a lot of expansion. Necromunda keeps moving along. They keep pushing it and coming out with new books and new models and new stuff all the time, which means it's selling well. You know, some people will think, oh, they're doing it because they like this or they like that. Honestly, they follow sales. They're a big company. That's how you get to be a big company, is you follow sales. So if Necromunda from the get in 2017 didn't sell very well, you wouldn't have seen much else expanding on that particular thing. Same here with Mordheim. If they make it, and it's the old world, and these models are for the most part kind of only useful in the old world, it's going to be a little touchy. I mean, it was a little touchy with Necromunda. You can't use those models pretty much in any other GW-style game. They don't make rules for to use them in 40K or things like that from what I've seen, even though technically they're part of the 40K world, which I think is interesting, but that's another video altogether. So my point is, if you want to stay in the old world, that's a lot more of a risk for the company and for the people who are going to buy in also as well to some degree, because again, that game could then get shelved. If they want to kind of expand and go forward, in my opinion, you take Mordheim and you make it Age of Sigmar. You don't even release a box with a book and tons of really super cool terrain, ruined storefronts, ruined castles, ruined hovels, whatever, all that kind of cool plastic terrain, just a big box full of it, $160 plus a big thick book with all of the rules, campaign rules, all that cool stuff, and also have all of the stuff for kind of like Kill Team does, where the army lists are in there too. Don't put them in card packs that you have to try to chase around like you do with Warcry. Put them into a single book and go in that direction. And then there will be people who will just buy the book separately, because you'll sell that separately too if you're smart. And there will be people who will buy it because they want the terrain. And then also, just like they did with Kill Team, you can also just release the terrain separately in boxes as well for people who have no interest in Mordheim right now, but they really love that terrain for Age of Sigmar or potentially any other kind of fantasy-style game. In my mind, that makes sense. And it loses the old world flavor. And let's understand, allegedly, they have a Warhammer Old World thing coming out sometime in the next 3 years, probably longer. But that's when they say that they're going to be coming out with some stuff. I still think that that's probably going to be Forge World only, and I don't want Mordheim to be Forge World only, so there's that as well. So there's 3 different options here. I think the switch to Age of Sigmar is the smart one. You probably disagree. I have a suspicion you probably do. I guess let me know down in the comments below if you like that kind of thing. But I think that it makes a lot of sense because it could produce some great new terrain. Because honestly, Age of Sigmar doesn't have that much great terrain. They've got some okay stuff, and they've got some stuff that's frankly kind of janky. Having some really nice new sets of terrain for Age of Sigmar, plus having this new game that you can play, either you buy the kit with the set and the book, or you just buy the book separately because you already got tons of terrain yourself that you scratch built, and that's very cool. Whatever. I think that we could see this kind of slot down here, right? You've got your Necromunda over here, you've got Mordheim over here. That's a slot that they could still fill at this point. And I think that it would also just be another way to help bring more people into the hobby, because I know that besides Space Hulk, Necromunda back in the day, that's what brought me into the hobby. So these small games help with that, and obviously there's Warcry and Kill Team and all that kind of stuff, but another one to bring in there, especially that would also help fill this kind of missing sort of Age of Sigmar terrain slot, I think it'd be a super good idea. So let me know what you think.